तो आज जो हम पोएम करने वाले हैं उसका नाम है टू ऑटम बाय जॉन कीट्स। जॉन कीट्स जो थे वो यंग रोमांटिक माने जाते हैं। ये रोमांटिक एज के पोइट थे और ये बहुत यंग एज में इनकी डेथ हो गई थी। तो जॉन कीट्स हैं, इन्होंने एक पोएम लिखी थी टू ऑटम जो कि एक ओड है। तो हम आज इसके बारे में बात करेंगे कि टू ऑटम जो पोएम है वो क्या है। बैकग्राउंड: In To Autumn, John Keats vividly describes the three stages of autumn, from a season of mists and mellow fruitfulness through a time after the harvest and finally to the first signs of approaching winter. तो जो जॉन कीट्स हैं इन्होंने ऑटम को 3 स्टेजेस में बांटा है इस पोएम के अंदर। फ्रॉम अ सीजन ऑफ मिस्ट एंड मेलो फ्रूटफुलनेस, जहाँ से स्टार्ट होता है और जहाँ पे ये ख़त्म होता है जो ऑटम है वहाँ तक। John Keats was considered one of the greatest poets of the Romantic genre. Written in September of 1819, this piece is regarded as his most achieved ode. Keats totally accepts the natural world with its mixture of ripening, fulfillment, dying, and death. What is an ode? An ode is a poem that is written for an occasion or on a particular subject. It is an elaborately structured poem praising or glorifying an event or individual, describing nature, etc. The English ode's most common rhyme scheme is ABA, BCD, ECD, E. Keats wrote to Autumn after enjoying a lovely autumn day. He described his experience in a letter to his friend Reynolds. ये जो है ये पोएम है सीजन ऑफ मिस्ट एंड मेलो फ्रूटफुलनेस, क्लोज बॉजम फ्रेंड ऑफ द मैच्योरिंग सन, कंस्पायरिंग विद हिम हाउ टू लोड एंड ब्लेस विद फ्रूट द वाइन्स दैट राउंड द थैच ईव्स रन, टू बैंड विद एप्पल्स द मोजेड कॉटेज ट्रीज एंड fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel to set budding more, and still more later flowers of the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has overbrimmed their clammy cells. The first stanza begins with Keats painting a picture of autumn as being a season of mist and mellow fruitfulness. This is used in conjunction with the use of the image of a maturing sun, which ripens the autumn harvest of views and the fruits. He describes the fruit being ripened to the core. The gourds are swelled, the hazelnuts plumbed, and trees bent from the weight of the apples. So the first stanza describes the quite vividly the fullness and abundance of life. In the poem to Autumn, the initial impression that we get is that Keats is describing a typical autumn day with all its colors and images. On deeper reading, it becomes evident that the poem is rather a celebration of the cycle of life and acceptance that death is part of life. Keats describes autumn with a series of specific, concrete, vivid visual images. The stanza begins with autumn at the peak of fulfillment and continues the ripening to an almost unbearable intensity. Initially, autumn and the sun load and bless by ripening the fruit, but the apple becomes so numerous that their weight bends the trees, the gourds swell and the hazelnuts plump. This fertility that has no end is suggested in the flower and bee images in the last 4 lines of the stanza. Keats refers to more later flowers budding. The potentially overwhelming number of flowers is suggested by the repetition and still more flowers. The bees cannot handle this abundance, and for their cells are overbrimmed. In other words, their cells are not just but are overfull or brimming over with honey. The second stanza is this: Who hath not seen thee oft amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hairs soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twined flowers. And sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press with patient look thou watched the last oozing hours by hours. In the second stanza, the speaker describes the figure of Autumn as a female goddess, often seen sitting on the granary floor, her hair soft lifted by the wind, and often seen sleeping in the fields or watching a cider press, squeezing the juice from apples. The second stanza has a bit of different approach where Keats is addressing someone. He personifies autumn as a woman, for he refers to autumn by thy hair is soft lifted by the winnowing wind. In line 12, he addresses autumn to rhetorical question. It is clear that autumn is the time for harvesting, gathering, and preparing for the winter that lies ahead. The stanza ends appropriately in that it literally describes the process of the last apples being pressed for cider. But more importantly, it describes the last breaths of life being squeezed out of autumn. The ongoing ripening of stanza first, which if continued would become unbearable, has neared completion. This stanza slows down and contains almost no movement. Autumn, personified as a reaper or a harvester, crosses a brook and watches a cider press. Some work remains, the furrow is half reaped. The winnowed hair refers to ripe grain still standing and apple cider still being pressed. However, the end of the cycle is near. The press is squeezing out the last oozings. Notice that Keats describes a reaper who is not harvesting and who is not turning the press. Is the personification successful? That is, does nature become a person with a personality or does nature remain an abstraction? Is there a sense of depletion of things coming to an end? Does the slowing down of process suggest a stopping, a dying, or death? Does the personification of autumn as a reaper with a scythe suggest another kind of reaper, the grim reaper? This is the third stanza. So, in the third stanza, the speaker tells Autumn not to wonder where the songs of springs have gone, but instead to listen to her own music. At twilight, the small nets hum above the shallows of the river, lifted and dropped by the wind, and full-grown lambs bleat from the hills. Crickets sing, robins whistle from the garden, and swallows gathering for their coming migration sing from the skies. The third stanza continues with another two rhetorical questions, one iterating the other. Where are the songs of spring? Aye, where are they? This stanza is probably the bleakest of the three, as there is direct reference to death. Words like soft dying day, mourn, the light wind lives or dies are all references to the dying of autumn. Spring in line first has the same function as summer in stanza first. They represent process, the flux of the time. In addition, spring is a time of a rebirth of life, an association which contrasts with explicitly dying autumn of this stanza. Furthermore, autumn spells death for the now full-grown lambs which were born in spring. They are slaughtered in autumn, and the answer to the question of line first, where are spring songs, is that they are past or dead. The day, like the season, is dying. The dying of the day is presented favorably, soft dying. Its dying also creates beauty. The setting sun casts a bloom of rosy hue over the dried stubble or stalks left after the harvest. Keats accepts all aspects of autumn. This includes the dying, and so he introduces sadness. The gnats mourn in a wailful choir, and the doomed lambs bleat. It is a light or enjoyable wind that lives or dies, and the treble of the robin is pleasantly soft. The swallows are gathering for their winter migration. Keats blends living and dying, the pleasant and the unpleasant, because they are inextricably one. He accepts the reality of the mixed nature of the world. Themes in the poem. To Autumn is one of the simplest of Keats' odes. There is nothing confusing or complex in Keats' ode to the season of autumn, with its fruitfulness, its flowers, and the song of its swallows gathering for migration. To autumn shows Keats' speaker paying homage to a particular goddess, in this case, the deified season of autumn. Autumn in Keats' ode is a time of warmth and plenty, but it is perched on the brink of winter's desolation. As the bees enjoy later flowers, the harvest is gathered from the fields. The lamps of spring are now full grown, and in the final line of the poem, the swallows gather for their winter migration. Despite the coming chill of winter, the late warmth of autumn provides Keats a speaker with ample beauty to celebrate. The cottage and its surroundings in the first stanza, the agrarian haunts of the goddess in the second, and the locales of nature creatures in the third. Keats wrote to autumn after enjoying a lovely autumn day. There is no visionary dreamer or attempted flight from reality in this poem. In fact, there is no narrative voice or persona at all. The poem is grounded in the real world. The vivid, concrete imagery immerses the reader in the sights, feel, and sounds of autumn and its progression. With its depiction of the progression of autumn, Keats totally accepts the natural world, with its mixture of ripening, fulfillment, dying, and death. To Autumn is written in a three stanza structure with a variable rhyme scheme. Each stanza is 11 lines long. In terms of both thematic organization and rhyme scheme, each stanza is divided roughly into two parts. In each stanza, the first part is made up of the first four lines of the stanza, and the second part is made up of the last seven lines. The first part of each stanza follows an ABAB rhyme scheme, the first line rhyming with the third and the second line rhyming with the fourth. The second part of each stanza is longer and varies in rhyme scheme. The first stanza is arranged C D E D C C E, and the second and third stanza are arranged C D E E D D E. Thematically, the first part of each stanza serves to define the subject of the stanza, and the second part offers room for musing, development, and speculation on that subject. However, this thematic division is only very general. So, this was all. This was Ode to Autumn by John Keats, which is prescribed in our BA second year syllabus. So, it is for BA second year students who are who have come to BA second year after completing their BA first year. If you have any query, you can ask me in the comment section.